I'm going to start this one all over because I don't like editing these things. I don't edit them. Well, welcome to Giving Psychology Away number 136. As I was starting this video, I was reminded that I had an 11 o'clock that I blew for a training session. Oh, I really needed that training session too. So that one's on me. It's money down the drain, just like the car repairs this morning. It's money down the drain because I didn't carry cash with me. Okay. Everything's costing all of us too much these days, but I have to remind myself, as I will remind you, that there is no money today. We have a system of enslavement. The country was founded upon a system of coin currency, gold and silver. Certainly we turned to copper and a nickel as well. And then we gave it all to the thieves of the world, to the guys running the place today. And you want to know why it's all corrupt, and you want to know why there's only a one-party system in the rule today. It's because we handed it over slowly but surely to our enemies. How do we do that? How do we fall asleep at the wheel? Well, quite simply, what we did is we fell asleep at the wheel. We failed to watch and stand guard. We refused to listen to those who were warning us. Instead, we listened to the smooth talk, to the flattery and the deception, the lies. And when that wasn't good enough for us, they murdered us, and they still do that today. I was hoping to start this and tell you I was ahead of the game, ahead of the curve, and that I would have gone after Mexico a long time ago. As a matter of fact, I would have gone after it during the Trump administration. That's when I was motivated to do it. What do we need to build a wall for? First, we need to make it illegal to be in the country illegally. But we don't have that will anymore. We're not allowed that because that's discriminatory. That's racist. And so the Democrats have been able to destroy the composition of the country, the composition of the electorate, to make it go in their favor so they could have their communism. And if you think this isn't communism, well, it ain't very far off the deep edge right now. We just need a bloodbath, and they're making arrangements for that. They've already arranged for that. They've planned this all in advance. So now we finally have people talking about going after Mexico. Look, I think if I was president during Trump's administration, within the first year, I would have gone to war against Mexico. I would have asked Congress for a limited war. And I would have sent my special forces down there to take out the drug cartels, including the bad politicians that are allowing that stuff to happen. But the big problem is we've got that right here in our own country to clean up, and we can't do it. We won't do it. Look at the state of New Hampshire. Wow. Talk about going downhill. The whole thing is corrupt by the drug business, by the opioid, the fentanyl stuff. I mean, even the DEA loses a full truckload, 80,000 pounds of fentanyl, pharmaceutical grade, sealed up in nice factory boxes, and they lose the entire truck. So, who's lining their pockets on that? And then you've got brave men standing up, and they can't get any traction. They can't get any recognition. They can't get anybody to enforce the laws properly. Wow. We are in trouble. What else is going on that's a problem? I would have declared a limited war with Mexico. I would have sent special forces in there to dispatch them with prejudice, meaning I wasn't going to take prisoners. I was going to bury them. And then I was going to send my army down there to administer justice to that territory that we're now going to seize. Take the whole entire country, and I wanted to go as far as to document, add up, detail, do the accounting on everything their population has stolen from our population. I know you want to sit there and say we're the thieves and we stole from them. No, I want to find out what they've taken from us that they shouldn't have taken. What we've given them, especially in Social Security, which a Republican liberalized so that they could take advantage of and destroy that system on us. Everything has been set up to do Saul Alinsky's program, to cause so much confusion, so much mayhem, so much disorganization that our country goes down the tubes. And we've gone down the tubes. We are in very, very bad shape right now. We have a fellow in Arizona, an elderly gentleman, who's been set up. He awoke to gunfire on his property in front of his house. And now they tried to charge him with first-degree premeditated murder. I don't know who arrested him and charged him with that. I don't know who the prosecutors are down there. I don't know who the judges are down there. But my God, how do you premeditate that you're going to murder somebody who's shooting at your house? Somebody who's endangering your life? I don't think you do that. Doesn't make sense. But they're going to make an example of him. By God, I wish I was president. I would call for the militia right here, right now, and tell those men you're able to defend your country. If you're a member of the militia in good standing and you defend this nation as part of the duty, you're protected. And I'd love to tell adult citizens here, if you want to round them up, we'll pay you per head. That would be an economic stimulus program. But you're too busy in this country with your sacred cows and worshiping the wrong critters completely. You're busy worshiping the almighty debt dollar, the dollar that's created out of nothing, that has nothing behind it. Good faith and credit? What, from our slave masters? From those who have stolen our money since 1913? We legitimize that theft of theirs? Oh, and there's no controlling the inflation. They don't want to control the inflation. They're bringing us down. It's part of how they wage war and how they destroy a nation. They decided to destroy us more than a decade ago, and this is what they're doing to us. And they're attacking us chemically. You think all these trains all derail at about the same time with dangerous chemicals on them? And you think, I don't know who's at the helm. Who's at the EPA office who decides we're going to burn the contents of a train and create a dioxin bomb, a toxicity that's going to last centuries? Who the hell in their right mind made that decision? And they're going to hide behind the office, and we're going to say, well, it was government incompetence. No, it was a crime. Why is it not being investigated like a crime? Why are the culprits that made these horrible decisions not being charged with their... Wow, I mean, it's a crime against humanity. It's a crime against Mother Earth. It's a major set of crimes. We've allowed things to get out of hand in this country. We're just seeing the beginning of it. They've been destroying food processing plants and diminishing our ability to produce food to feed ourselves so drastically, so quickly, that we are going to have shortages this summer. And then our food processors are allowed to make basically poisons for us, using chemicals that have never been tested. There's at least 100,000 maybe 300,000 chemical compounds that they are allowed to use upon us that have never been tested for toxicity, for their abilities to cause cancers, birth defects, all kinds of stuff. Good girl. She got a little growl going. I don't see anything out there. She seems to be on edge. I slept in a little bit this morning. I slept well. I see that they're making announcements to sucker us in further. Folks, they are not trying to rein in inflation. Actually, their actions are going to cause more inflation. The central banking system is set up to predate upon you, and it's set up to take you down. And that's what they're going to do. They're going to create the most havoc they can to destroy this country and bring it finally to its full knees, where you will have to recognize that you've been defeated by an enemy inside the country. There's no way that we can escape their clutches at this point. Except maybe if we turn to Creator Father Yahweh and pray. You say, well, that's not very effective. Well, you've got to be able to build the Holy Spirit within you. You've got to be able to build that connection with Yahweh. Yahweh will tell you what to do. I'm not kidding about that. The Holy Spirit is there. It's available. But it's only available to a certain group of people on the planet. And I'm sorry, Creator Father Yahweh God is racist. He chose the ones he wants. He chose, and he can use anyone. And we are at odds as far as what the Bible really means. The Bible is a history book, first and foremost. It is a law history book. And if you abide by the law, natural law even, then you get the blessings. And if you fail to abide by it, the curses are delineated. The consequences are delineated in the Bible. They're very clear. There's twice as long a passage there in two different sections of the Bible that have to do with the consequences for failure to obey. And there's also two passages in there for the rewards for obedience. I do want to turn to it, but this is not the Bible reading, Bible study channel. The other channel, Awakening Israel, is that. When we were founded as a nation, our founders knew who they were. They knew who we were. And when George Washington passed away, Thomas Jefferson began the obituary. A great man in Israel has passed away. I think I have that right. Go look it up. So we knew that we were descendants of the house of Israel. You know, the supposed lost 10 tribes of Israel. No, we were taken out of Israel, out of northern half of Israel, by the Assyrians. Generally speaking, they ran 3 or 4 incursions, military campaigns, and took us hostage and took us out and settled us into 3 places south of the Caucasus Mountain Range, using us as a buffer between themselves and their enemies, the Medes. And the southern house of Judah, the southern house of Judah, those 2 tribes or so, you got the Levites, and the tribe of Simeon kind of flowed back and forth across the borders. They were hauled out later. And they went to Babylon instead of to Assyria. And when the time came, and I now have read the apocryphal book, so I now know where this comes from, they took counsel among themselves, and the prophet told them they weren't going to go back home. This is to the house of Israel, the northern 10 tribes, generally speaking, northern 10. And they decided they were going to follow what the prophet said they were going to do, which was they were going to not go back home, they were going to go in lands that were never inhabited or not inhabited, and that they were going to, there in those lands, they were going to abide better by the Ten Commandments than they did back in their own country of Israel. And they were going to forget who they were. They were going to experience amnesia, and they would no longer be called by their father's name. They were no longer going to be called Israel, after their father Israel. Israel was a man, it wasn't a land. And so today, most of the Israelites don't know who they are. We don't know who we are. And in my state, just like I think your state, I'm not allowed to call myself a Caucasian when I do my driver's license or anything else. I have to check off the box that says I'm white. Why is that? Why is it they use a color or lack of color, whatever you want to call it? Why is it that they insist that I call myself a white man instead of a Caucasian? You know what I think it is? I think they don't want me to ask, gee, how did I get called a Caucasian? How did we come to be called Caucasians? We were called Caucasians after the Caucasus mountain range. When our ancestors migrated across the Caucasus, that was about 650 BC, approximately then. So we're named after the Caucasus mountain range. And of course, I don't think they want you or I remembering or realizing who we are. Because they're busy running around calling themselves the chosen ones, and they aren't. They aren't the seed of Abraham. So, where do we come from before we cross the Caucasus mountain range? That's the question. They don't want you asking that question because you might discover you're from the house of Israel. And since they're running around in all the churches across this nation declaring that you're Gentiles, grafted in by grace, come on. They don't want you knowing the truth. They don't want you to understand your real identity. No, they can't have that. Now, the house of Israel was granted a bill of divorce. It says that twice in the Old Testament. I've read that. I've seen that myself. Go look it up for yourself. The house of Judah, the southern house, was not given a bill of divorce, yet they did the same sins. Not quite, but pretty close to it. And they were hauled out a little bit later. But when it came time, they went back. They went back to the promised land. They went back home. They built the temple, the second temple. Whereas the Israelites bolted across the Caucasus mountain range into Europe and the rest of the world. So they don't want you to know the truth. And the new covenant, it says clearly in the Bible, was formed with the same people he did the old covenant with. And there is a pass called the Darrow Pass in the Caucasus mountain range. It's about 13,000 feet through that pass. And our ancestors, generally speaking, crossed in 3 giant waves, 3 giant migrations across the Caucasus mountain range. And in that pass is chiseled in stone the gates of Israel in Paleo-Hebrew. Not in Yiddish, and not even in modern Hebrew. In the old ancient language, the alphabet of which we Israelites didn't invent. We got that from the Phoenicians. And where did the Phoenicians get that alphabet and their language? from Polynesia. Yeah, of all places, from Polynesia during the last Earth Age. They were survivors of it. They were on ships. They survived that cataclysm back then. The interesting thing is they also had maritime law. And also the Phoenicians were not a very nice people. The only records we have were written about them by their neighbors. They had nothing nice to say about them, and the Phoenicians did not keep records on themselves. They didn't want people knowing their identity. They didn't want people knowing who they were, what they did, or what they were up to. They weren't nice people. And today we are ruled by not nice people. We are ruled by those who hate us. Why? Because we turned our backs on Creator, Father God, Yahweh. So the Bible tells me. Can you tell me it's any different than that? No. What are the foundations for Western civilization? The Bible, basically, is the foundation. What's under attack today? Western civilization. They went after our Bibles. They changed our Bibles on us. They changed them up in really grand ways. They changed the meanings. They changed the orders. They changed the words. They changed everything around to confuse us as much as possible. And ultimately, the enemy decided the only way they could take us over here, the great nation that was prophesied, predicted, if you insist, by Israel the man, was Manasseh, his oldest son through Joseph, the grandson he adopted, became the great nation, had the seed blessing, had the numbers. That is the United States of America. And the other boy, Ephraim, became a company of nations. That was Great Britain. Both countries have been destroyed. Both are occupied illegally by the evil ones. And in 1917, they published their wicked Bible called the Schofield Reference Study Bible. And probably the culmination that revealed, the edition that revealed their wickedness and their real intentions was in 1965. And the headings of the different chapters give them away as to what they had planned for us and who they were. And we are very fortunate because somehow or other the short nickname of Yahweh, Yah, made it through the book of Psalms. And because that made it through the book of Psalms, we wondered, what was that about? What's this Y-A-H, all capital letters, doing here? Well, the shortened name, the nickname of Yahweh, made it through in the King James Bible. Today we've got a better Bible called the proper name version of the King James Bible. And in it we've got the name of Yahweh. We've got God's proper name restored to it. That happened in 2015. The error, removing Yahweh's name, or removing God's proper name from the Bible, occurred in approximately 275 BC. Ptolemy II, the descendant of one of the four generals that inherited Alexander the Great's empire, he produced the Septuagint. Septuagint meaning 70. He had 70 men working on this translation. And why did they translate the Bible into Greek? Because the Israelites had been Hellenized by then. Most of the Israelites were in dispersion and they were speaking Greek. And so it was a practical reason. It was for all practicality that they translate a Hebrew and Aramaic Bible into Greek. Lorraine, quiet. What did I say? opposite. I'd love you to pick up one of these Bibles. Take the link down below. Yes, I get a little paycheck out of that someday. But the most important thing is that we get these Bibles out there and you read them, because you need to educate yourself. I will remind you that what President Barack Hussein Obama, what that traitorous, treasonous son of a bitch told us was that they cling to their guns and their Bibles. Well, here's the problem. You only got the hardware. You don't have this. You don't have the spirit. You don't have the understanding. To avoid being deceived and to understand. Lorraine, quiet. She's off on a tear today. Down. Now. Down. She's going to shake to delay the execution of it. What did I say? Get your bone. Get your bone. She's got some big bones. She's real proud of them. Down. That'll keep her busy for a bit. I'm not very happy that I blew a session with my personal trainer. You do not have money to waste. Anyway, and I don't even like calling it money. If you want to know what money is, go to the Bible. Study money in the Bible. Make a study of it. What is money? The Bible will tell you what money is. If you want to understand the laws that we began our nation with, go to the Bible. We derived most of our laws from the book of Deuteronomy. You need to understand that we have these deep roots. And when you understand that, you will see that we have been targeted by the evil one and his children for extermination. They've been working on this for quite a while, a couple of centuries. Yes, ever since we were founded. And they have made little grabs here or there for power and to undermine us. 1813, they sat the attorneys in Congress in violation of the original 13th Amendment for the separation of powers. If you want to reclaim your country, then insist on the 13th Amendment being restored and the separation of powers be enforced. No attorneys are allowed outside of the judiciary branch. They're not allowed to be in the executive branch or the legislative branches. We set that separation of powers in place after the War of 1812 because the attorneys got us into the War of 1812, and we didn't want that to happen again. Look at how messed up it is now. Now, I'm not going to blame that on all of that on the attorneys. We've had a lot of help in that. Right now, the medical doctors have been helping out these evil guys. But the politicians, wow, it's off the charts. Lorraine! She's not going to be happy with me. Sit. Sit. Yeah. Yeah, we got to put a leash on her inside the house to get a little bit of control over her. What I should do is go back there and close the curtain on the window so she can't look at the neighbor working and bark at him. She's wagging her tail, quick as can be, happy to be able to bark at him. I don't think that's quite neurotic, but it's not a very good sign. So I've got her on a short leash on a training collar. Folks, it might be too late for this country. It really might be too late. You see, the evil ones control all parties, all sides. Putin is under their control. Biden is certainly under their control. And the rest of the countries, the politicians that are supposed to be running them, they're all controlled at this point. Probably the only one that's a free man is Viktor Orban in Hungary. He seems to be the only adult in the room. Now we have Lindsey Graham talking about going after Mexico. He's talking tough because I think he wants to run for president. I'm sorry, we've already had one gay president. We don't need another one. The only thing is, at least Lindsey Graham would be a citizen. The last one wasn't a citizen. He was a British subject and a traitor to this country. They took us over through our Bibles. They gave us a different Bible, and they lied in the footnotes, the side notes, and all of that. There was more footnote, more commentary than there was Bible text, and they lied in that in order to take us down. They also manipulated us to go after the genuine ones, the Germans, the tribe of Judah, settled partly in Scotland, but mostly in Germany. And they had us going after the Germans. Why do you think they had us going after the German people? And there were more Germans killed after World War II than during the entire war. Eisenhower, in his Rhineland concentration camps, killed millions of Germans. What happened over there was absolutely horrible. And we walk around ignorant of what we have done, of what our nation has done, thinking we're the good guys. We would never do that. We've done it. And you think those were concentration camps in Germany. I disagree, and I think that's fair debate. It's fair to debate that. It's fair to research that. I think it would be a good idea to do that. But the originator of the concentration camps were the British in South Africa. 1905. Way ahead of World War II. Way ahead of World War I. They established concentration camps for the Boer farmers down there. You need to understand, the world has been really different than what we think. I remember looking at the history books in 6th grade, and man, those clipper ships were fast ships. And they had to be, because that tea had to be brought to market. What do you think they were hauling? They weren't hauling around tea for high tea to the Queen or anything like that. What do you think they were hauling around the planet? Dope. That's right. They were running drugs across the ship's seas as fast as they could to avoid the pirates. So you had pirateers and privateers. Back then it was legal. So they ran this cargo as fast as they could so they wouldn't get killed and robbed on the high seas. And the British did such horrible things to the Chinese. They forced them to take the opium and make it a currency. They basically enslaved those people. The Chinese Opium Wars, it was horrible what they did. And then look at our own State Department. Look at what they did to Chiang Kai-shek. Our State Department has been filled to the brim with communists for decades. And one of the biggest tells on that was when Chiang Kai-shek was ready with his army to invade mainland China and get it back from the Chinese communists. He was going to beat the Chi-Coms. And so what has to happen? We station our 7th Fleet between the island of Formosa, Taiwan, and mainland China. and blockade them so that they can invade China and win. They were going to win. They knew they were going to win. They were fully armed. They were ready to do the whole job. So why does our State Department, why does our government stop a free people from taking their land back and interfere in that? That's because they're communists. And then they directed General George S. Patton. They directed him in a fashion that he realized they were setting it up so most of Europe was going to go to the communists. Patton realized that there was very little he could do. His commanders were part of the bunch. He knew it. He recognized them for what they were. He swore he was going to run for president, and he was going to expose them for their communism and their poor decisions and how they screwed that war up every chance they got. That's why they had to murder him. It took 3 men coming together to decide to murder Patton. One of them being our own president, the other being Winston Churchill, and the other being Joseph Stalin. FDR was in on the hit. And he launched it using a particular colonel. I don't remember his name offhand. And they set up the assassination attempt using an air rifle and using a mock auto accident to slow him down and give the assassin a chance to shoot him. Through the barely open window, which was not roll all the way up as a result of sabotage. It was well planned, including the young driver who caused the accident staged that thing so they could slow down his vehicle and get a shot off at him. He was supposed to die. He did not die. And a week later, he was so strong that they were going to bring him home. And that's when Joseph Stalin sent his man in, dressed as some sort of a medical orderly or physician, went in and administered the death blow to General Patton. And your president and your other communist in chief over in England, Churchill, and your communist in Russia, Stalin, they all cheered because they weren't going to be discovered. They've been running game on you and me, running game on this country for centuries at this point. Our history books are filled with lies. It is horrible. The OSS was the predecessor to the CIA. It was started by a British gentleman named Stevenson. And there's another fellow, I don't remember his name, who was a communist who started it as well. But when they started, it was claimed that they were infiltrated by the communists. And this founder of the CIA, the name I can't remember, said, oh, no, they didn't infiltrate us. We hired them. We brought them aboard. And you can bet the British never relinquished our own OSS to American control. They kept American control. And in case you're wondering why we sacrificed so many boys at Normandy, it was because of the peccadillos of Ike. What did Ike do? Ike succumbed to the wiles of his captain, the one who drove him around, blonde-haired, blue-eyed British captain. She was a trained agent, trained in the art of non-stop love, I guess is the way they described it back then. But she had him bamboozled so much that he wrote his superior officer, General Marshall, and told him when he got back to the States he was going to divorce his wife, Mamie, and marry the captain. George Marshall, whatever his name was. General Marshall knew that he was being handled by this blonde-haired, blue-eyed officer, female officer. And by the way, at the end of the war, she went and retired to a Rothschild's castle, where she lived like royalty the rest of her life for the service to her country. And as a direct result of her sexual services to Ike, Eisenhower was talked into sacrificing American boys on Normandy when it should have been the British going in there. And I know you're going to say Hitler was an evil, wicked dude. I think he had handlers around him too, because the Battle of Dunkirk was a miracle according to the British, because the British were stranded and they were just in a big trap. And Hitler went against the advice of his generals, who insisted that they open up and destroy the British troops. That was the miracle that occurred. The humanity of Adolf Hitler allowed those troops to survive, to return home. He didn't want the war. The guys who wanted the war were on the other side of the channel from him. Churchill wanted the war. Churchill wanted the war so badly that it was he that guided the Lusitania to the German sub that they had picked out to shoot the Lusitania, to sink the Lusitania for them. And Lusitania was a prepared ship. It was loaded with munitions. And the Germans took out a notice in all of our papers. It got pulled, except for in the Des Moines Register, I believe it was. Don't travel aboard this ship. It is a military target. It's carrying armaments on it. You know what the German captain said, who sank the Lusitania, said? He said he couldn't believe his eyes. He figured a ship that size was going to require 4 torpedoes. He launched 1 torpedo. The explosion was so massive, he didn't bother sending another torpedo out there. We think the ship was prepared to be sunk. It's called a false flag. It's called motivating your people into war, hoodwinking the American people into World War I. World War I never would have been possible if the Rothschilds hadn't been able to set up a bank over here using J.P. Morgan as one of their front men and the Warburg guy coming over here. They set up a horrible system. It wouldn't have been possible had the banking men not been on the Titanic when it sank. The 3 bankers would have opposed the formation of the Federal Reserve and saved our nation. Woodrow Wilson remarked and said he was a most miserable man, most unhappy, because he realized he had destroyed his country. It's just taken us a long time. Yeah. You want to know whether you should vote Democrat or Republican? Fire them all. I swear, if you can find old phone books, get those out and pick people out from the phone book. You'll get better congressmen, maybe even better senators. I still think you have to go to the original construction, the original government, provided that the state governments were represented in the Senate. And the state governments, the states, were the parties to the Constitution. So you haven't had a republic, definitely since the states no longer were represented. And if a senator did not vote the way the state government wanted them to vote, they were subject to instant recall, firing on the spot. They'd have to go home to the seat in their state legislatures to which they had been elected and finish that term off. But they weren't going to stay in Washington, D.C. That was one of the safeguards we had in place. That's why the Senate was considered the safeguard. Things were to go slowly through the Senate. And those guys had to mind their P's and Q's or they would get recalled. They weren't allowed to be uncouth. They weren't allowed to have low lives or live horrible ways. They'd be just yanked out. They'd be sent home. And here we have presidents that keep waging war. Except Trump, he didn't wage any war. The country's been hijacked, it's been stolen, it's been robbed. There is no money. Wealth is gone. The original patented land, the original titles to your land, those have been destroyed. You don't even know what those are. You don't even know what those provided for. You see, that was one of those vestiges that came over from ancient Israel. They couldn't tax your property. They couldn't attach it. You had all rights to it. That was courtesy of the Kent family, by the way, from the county of Kent. It's another story. We're not going to deal with it here today. Sure, certainly if I was president, I'd be waging war with Mexico. Not against the Mexican people, but I certainly would be taking the cartels out. The problem is, if I was to do that now, I'd be taking out probably half of the American government with it, because they're all dirty. And the other real problem is that, according to Catherine Austin Fitts, one of the brightest women ever to exist in history, she was the Assistant Secretary to Housing, Urban, and Development under the Reagan administration. According to Catherine Austin Fitts, our retirements are invested in the drug business. So if we actually waged a proper war against drugs, our retirements would disappear. Isn't it marvelous to know that they've hoodwinked us and cheated us and deceived us so that they've got us investing in our own demise? Yeah. It's hard to trust any man at this point. Don't put your trust in man. Put it in Yahweh, Creator, Father. Be grateful for what you have going for the day. I am. I had some nutrition, had my medicine, got up late. I slept late last night. As I said on Facebook, it's good to have a good night's sleep just before the crash. That's been scheduled, and it's in there by design. I don't think you can stop it. Certainly, you can't stop it as long as this guy Powell is in charge. He's taking it down on purpose. He's causing the inflation. When you raise the interest rates to fight inflation, that's hogwash. It doesn't work that way. When you raise the interest rates, you choke off the economy. If you want to decrease inflation, then you need to reduce the paper money in circulation. You need to reduce the money supply. You should be requiring the banks to hold more currency in reserve. Pull it out of circulation. And then your prices will decrease. There's going to be pain no matter what. I certainly don't have all the answers, that's for sure. I haven't thought that far, but I do know this. I'd close that border down. I'd reinstitute tariffs and duties on everything, including labor, including expertise, coming over the phone lines and over the internet. I'd require everybody to pay in the national treasury. And I would level the playing field by getting rid of the infernal internal revenue service, their taxes. There would be no more non-profit organizations here. I would level the playing field fully so that the competition would be fair, because you have these people that get special privileges. The rest of us are throttled back by all kinds of rules and regulations, whereas these other outfits, because they're non-profit and better than you or I, especially these hospitals. Yeah. They're given special dispensation from the God, your God, the state. And one of your gods is the god of war. He's having a good time. And another god of yours is Moloch, Baal. Yeah, this place was dedicated to him. He loves children to be sacrificed. My God, did we screw things up. We had things made until Woodrow Wilson was honeypotted by Mrs. Peck and her husband. That was probably the worst president ever, who did the worst things imaginable to us. But then there's Barack Obama, who changed our policy regarding our nuclear response so that we get hit before we even respond. It used to be we would launch on warning. Now we're going to wait a full day before we even assess the damage. Then we will decide what action to take. And then everything in this country has been made vulnerable to an EMP attack, including our military. So you just hit the place with an EMP, and that's it. You don't even have the industry to be able to build transformers or rebuild transformers. You aren't going to be able to pull it back together here at all. So that's probably what the enemy wants to do. That way they don't have to irradiate the entire lands. Oh, Lord. And as far as this thing that's going in the Ukraine, Putin says he has something to tell us when we're ready to listen. Isn't it time we asked him to tell us why he's in there, what he's doing, what his purposes are? I think he's beholden to the King of England, just like the presidents here in this country are beholden to the King of England. I think the King of England is beholden to the Vatican. And I think on top of that, you've got maybe the Rothschilds in there somewhere. You got the Jesuits in there for sure. And above all, you got the bankers, the money changers, the people that came out of Babylon, the people that came out of Mount Seir, Mount Edom. And you've got this medical profession, which is so weird because the body is labeled in Latin and your medicine is all made of poisons labeled in Greek. Why do they do these things? Why is there so much disparity so that we can't understand? Lindsey Graham is late to the party. I think he's a traitor. From what I hear, he's one of those guys that gives one of those weird salutes when he gets off the plane in foreign nations. Places where he's more of a free man and can express himself. Just like your president. He gets to do a different kind of salute when he gets off the plane in the Ukraine because he's a free man over there. Over here, he's got to put on a big act for you. No, I say you send all the Congress home and you tell the states, you tell those peoples, elect your Congress, send them. They're not getting paid. We'll give them a simple per diem for days served to help defray the cost of lodging and meals while they're in service to the country. But we give them no pay and no benefits. We don't even give them free medical benefits anymore. And then we send those senators packing as well and tell the state governments, you need to form organic governments, not these corporations that you have going on right now. And once you have those, then we want you to send us 2 men or women from your legislators, from those people duly elected to the state legislatures, to represent your state governments in D.C. And we're not going to pay them. No, we're not going to pay them. We're not going to give them any benefits. They are working for the state, their state. Your state will pay them the salary and the benefits to which you deem is appropriate. So they aren't all going to get paid the same amount of money. It'll be up to the states. I think it should be a requirement. The governor and the treasurer of the state sign those checks. And it be a physical check. Gets carried by the United States Postal Service. Or should we really have a real post office again? And all these corporations and the courts that are incorporated have to go by the wayside. And we certainly aren't going to have a federal government that rewards bad behavior, like paying people for medical procedures that are unnecessary, or diagnoses that are not accurate, or treatments that are not merited. We've been paying them to kill people. You realize that? You get whatever it is you reward. We've been rewarding them to kill people. Don't think we need that kind of monopoly in this country. What do you think? And the banks should be allowed to fail. They shouldn't be insured by the federal government. If they can't manage themselves properly, then they need to fail. And we all take that chance. No, we can't all be protected. Life is kind of dangerous. There's risk. But we can take some of the risk out by not allowing them to use these debt instruments, these paper instruments that they've devised to balloon up the money supply and rob the rest of us, and take over our government and our institutions and pay their hired hands, their murderers, their thieves, their criminals. All of this honeypotting that's been going on. We here in the United States of America have more of our people incarcerated or on paper, on probation, than any other nation on the earth. Shouldn't that tell you something? Isn't that something that you would only expect of a communist dictatorship? Maybe we should go back and remove all the amendments down to the original 13th Amendment. And maybe citizenship should only occur at the level of the states and not at the level of the federal government. And maybe there should be no income tax. The government should be required to run on tariffs and duties collected at the borders like it ran till Woodrow Wilson became president. And I guess he changed the Constitution to be able to put that income tax on us, that graduated communist income tax. And we have certain families among us that have been doing all kinds of mischief. They're guilty of war crimes, crimes against humanity. Should we not make good and hand them over for proper trials? Yes, we should do that. And we have had them wage wars that were totally unnecessary, sometimes killing millions of people. And then we have others who are also serial killers, mass murderers. What about that last governor for New York State? How many tens of thousands of elderly did he kill by sentencing them to going into nursing homes because they had COVID? And look over at England, because what they did in England, they did it here too. In England, they issued a lot of a particular drug, and they euthanized those people. And we have the witness of them. But the problem was that most of those bodies were cremated. They destroyed the evidence. But there's enough evidence there to know that they distributed, what was that called? Versed? There's another name for it. That's the marketing name, Versed. It's used for anesthesia. It's also used to euthanize. That's what they did over in England. So what is it that they used over here on this side of the pond? What did our government use on our own people? Oh, don't tell me your government would never do that to you. Don't tell me that now. All right, we're going to close now. It's been a full hour. It cost me some money to make this because I forgot about my own personal training session. So I hope you enjoy the day. You want to help me and support me, click that link, buy one of my Bibles. I thank the gentleman who made an off-the-cuff donation quite a while back. I'm going to go look his name up and at least mention his first name. I've been meaning to do that for a while, but I'm an old guy. I'm forgetful as can be, as you can tell. I looked at the wrong day for the calendar. I thought it was clear, and it's not. And I actually had an 11 o'clock appointment, which I blew. And I told Lance it was on me. He's been very kind to me and he's given me a lot of latitude. I'm not expecting it this time. I sure would love it, though. Anyway, you take care. It's over an hour. May Yahweh bless you. May you bless Yahweh. Yeah, it works both ways. May you turn to Yahweh. May you learn His name. Get one of my Bibles and read it. That's the best way you can learn His name and get used to it. Quiet. She sees the Democrat out there. The guy has the Ukrainian flag, so I told him, I see you running the satanic flag. And he said he needed to investigate that. Well, most of you don't understand that the symbol on the Ukrainian flag is the god Molech. That's where it is. That's also called Baal, by the way. And you are out there worshiping that jackass? The highest paid actor in the world is President Vladimir Zelensky. Oh, and by the way, who's the gentleman handling him? Have you seen pictures of the real president of the Ukraine in his hat? Have you seen the pictures of the real president of Russia in his hat? They got the same handler, folks. We're all being played.